Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today. This is a new series of videos which I'm hoping to put on my channel, but they'll also be in the All Things Architecture environment, the community that we've set up. Um, I'm Paul Ingram, pretty much the founder of All Things Architecture and freelance contractor for quite some time. Um, One of the benefits of being in that network is I've got Richard here today who's going to give us some insights into fractional consulting. Richard, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Oh, thanks, Paul. So Richard Smith, I've been a contractor freelancer since 2005. So I've been running my company for 19 years now. And sort of fractional pretty much off the bat based on the current definition we're going with. But I think it's probably more recently where we've been trying to almost differentiate the sort of traditional mindset around contracting to more the fractional type of contracting that we're looking at now.
Cool. So a couple of things that we've discussed, we've looked at, and maybe the viewers would be interested in is the kind of maybe what we're going to say as an agenda for today. So I think some good points that we kind of had a bit of a chat about when we had a catch up before this was really what is fractional consulting and how does it differ from freelance consulting, which I think is maybe the norm that people have been doing for the last 20, 25 years. I mean, I've been a contractor since the late 90s. Another area that you were interested in was, like things like, is it part-time? Is it, like a full-time job? What does it offer to clients? Is it a flexible option? Is it a cheaper option? Is it less skilled? Is it more constraints? So I think there were good things, but I think there was an interesting one you were talking about, which was the risks to organisation and people. So that's one that I think will be good to explain to people. Maybe also what type of organisation it suits, because I think you and I both know that like there's no one size fits all in the contracting market, especially when you're out, talking to agents and things like that. So I think we could maybe have a go at some of those and maybe try and bring some standards. Because I know when you and I spoke, it was a bit like I thought I had a definition of fractional consultant. It was quite accurate, but then you had a slightly different definition. I
I
thought
think everyone
that's
has
really
a mindset.
interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting because we both come from quite an experienced contractor background, but yeah, we were both pitching it in different ways. So maybe just on that first topic then, what's a good definition to give the viewers of what fractional consulting means to you?
So, I mean, for me, it is literally, we could call it the evolution of contracting, but I think more appropriately, it's the reclassification of contracting.
Right.
So whereby, if we look at traditional contracting in any other segment than the one we would traditionally operate in, you operate under a provision or a service or a statement of work where you've got specific things you're looking to try and do or looking to try and provide. You're independent. You're not an employee. You're there. You're not being. You don't have that level of oversight from an employer. They're not tending to do things in a very, very specific way. It's all about the end deliverable and doing it. You have that contractual relationship, so it's all based in contract. It's very much generally a B2B contract. It's not an employer-employee type contract. Uh, they're temporary. They're great for change, but it's not generally a resource model for augmenting resource for a longer period of time in terms of bulking out what you might have as an existing capability. The generally the what you're looking for is very specific skills or expertise. It's not just a person.
Uh, Not a bum in the seat.
Well, and this is it, yeah. So it's not like somebody who's got a driving license per se, but somebody who's got very, very specific, or even just specific expertise or skills. That could be a soft type skill. It could be very hard in a very, very specific setting. Um, and obviously the way the payments work around that as well. So I think like with everything, payment's not guaranteed. It's based on the quality of the output ultimately, and it's generally if it's time and materials, that's great, in terms of at least the time as it's being consumed and as expenses are being accrued, they are being paid for, but within a schedule of achieving what you set out to achieve, um, with generally a payment clause, a delayed payment clause. Or fixed cost is a model that's really starting to become quite popular in this segment as well, where it's all very milestone based. Achieving the milestones unlocks the payments.
So
So
like a statement of work type thing then.
it's all very much statement of work, and I think that's what separates, let's say, your typical contracting fractional type work from that temporary employee type relationship, where it the outputs are actually going. So everybody knows up front what is expected, what needs to be delivered. It's not I'm bringing in a cleaner for 7 hours a day to maybe do X amount of houses, whatever that looks like. It's not an operational type arrangement. It's very much specifically a delivery type arrangement.
So do you think it saves like a client money? Like instead of having a bum on a seat for 3 months or 6 months, can you deliver? And there's a question of timeline as well, maybe. You
Yeah.
know, are you accelerating programs by doing that, where they get the ability to draw down on a PO, or they get the flexibility to say, I want you 2 days or I want you 5 days because the project has to do X, Y, Z. Is that kind of accurate?
They're probably coming back slightly. I mean, what is the client buying in that particular arrangement? So whereby, let's say, for example, they're just drawing down time. So what's the client buying? And is that are they buying just a resource augmentation, say person A, B, or C? Is it that person's got specific skills that they're actually being drawn on? Are they for specific tasks? Is it and this is it. So probably just coming back a bit in terms of that very specific question. Yeah, does it save clients money? Well, it could potentially cost clients more. It really comes down to what's the client trying to achieve and what's the benefits that come out of that. Now, you're not going to want to maybe bring in a permanent person to do X when X is quite transient. X might only happen once every blue moon. It might just be a a component of change, for example. And would person A actually be the best person to deliver that component of change whenever it lands or whenever it comes up? So at least then, okay, the cost is probably still going to be less on the whole fractional thing, but even if it was on par the same, at least you're able to directly attribute the cost to the benefit, and you're able to directly get the right person at the right time to do the right thing, rather than any of the potential overheads of just trying to get that one person to do something. Now, in terms of
Yeah,
PO drawdown, now a bit more of a complicated, because POs are generally associated to budgets on a client side. So for a typical sort of finance type, I want to have this budget to do something. There generally has to be some justification behind it within the organization.
right,
Now, it could be very much so, look, I want to have, argument's sake, an elastic resource to do X, Y, Z. And that might be operational things. That's less contracting, that's less fractional, that's more probably sort of a temporary employment relationship.
right, okay,
But what I won't dismiss here is, um, in terms of contracting fractional, they generally are underpinned by a PO. So you might have a contract, an MSA in place, you might have an SOW and all the rest of it, but
ah,
it's the PO that guarantees ultimately the payment. That is the promise that, you do a good job, you will get this money. Now, in terms of the drawdown of that PO, it's generally governed by the SOW in terms of hitting the milestones or providing whatever time is indicating that SOW. So in terms of a drawdown of a PO which is aligned to an SOW, that's normal practice. In terms of having a PO which is linked to something the business wants to do. That's normal practice. Having an elastic PO that maybe augments a team resource-wise, not capability-wise, that's probably a bit of a grey area, to be honest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so like when I've seen it, like when I've did some fractional consulting for clients, my definition, as you and I discussed, I was kind of like, well, to me it feels like it's maybe 2 to 3 days a week. It's not a full time thing. But then actually, you and I kind of came to the same conclusion. Was that might be wrong. You know, there's a good chance it's really more about the definition of the outcome. And if that outcome took 5 days, and interesting enough, I had you know, a global client last year who pretty much was happy to kind of save about 70% costs. So instead of having a bum in the seat for 20 grand a month,
Yeah.
then it was basically an output. So if it took me 5 days to do the output, and we kind of did some artifact production, you know, of, so there was some projects, you know, like a comms project, there was a database project, there was a marketing project. So there was some business projects and some tech projects. And what they were interested in doing was they were interested in having some of the governance stuff go through, but they didn't need somebody on site full time.
Yeah. So
So,
you're talking about there is an advisory type mechanism.
yeah,
Your
yeah,
SOW effectively governs an advisory type relationship that the client can basically call on advisory, providing you're available and all the rest of it based on a PO drawdown. And that's completely normal because it's governed by the SOW. There's a specific requirement there. It's not
yeah,
an elastic augment
yeah.
resource type arrangement.
So I had, like, for an example there, I had 5 work streams of work, but I had things like, you know, go to enterprise architecture governance forums, attend some workshops. So I might have a 1 week where I do 5 days. I might have 1 week where I do one day.
Yeah.
So because it's more aligned to what the actual work is, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that was a kind of interesting thing that you and I both had sort of similar but not perfectly aligned descriptions of what we go.
We are very much aligned, to be honest. But I like with everything, especially in the area we work in with architecture. There's many
Yeah,
ways of seeing the same subject, and obviously, if we focus based on the supply pattern, then in your instance there, it looks like part time. But what we've actually got there is a supply pattern based on time and materials, which is called upon when it best suits the objectives of the client.
yeah, yeah, totally accurate. Yeah,
Yeah. Now, in this instance, your instance, your example, that could be ironically 3 days a week or whatever that looks like in terms of what support that client needs through that advisory at whatever time. It could be 5 days a week, or it could be 2 days 1 month and then 30 days the next one, not 30, but 20 days the next month. And this is it. It's the pattern of supply is not what makes something fractional.
mm,
It doesn't have to be a fixed 3 days a week for 12 months.
yeah,
Converse to that, it doesn't have to be 5 days or 1 month every 1 day every month or
yeah,
however it looks. It could ramp up and ramp down based on the requirements of the client and what
yeah.
they ultimately need.
So, like, a good definition for me was end of the month, architecture governance, you know, EDA, you know, enterprise design authority. So I need to present and get the actual product through or the project through. But the first week is maybe building the documentation and talking to the different stakeholders, getting all that information. And then maybe just like the next week is like a day. So I might have done 5 days in that first week. I know I've got a day at the end for the Enterprise Design Authority because I've got to sit on a call and wait until I'm actually active. So that could take 3 hours. So there's kind of half a day. So I know I've got 5.5 days spent, and maybe say I've got a PO for 15 days. And I'm not going to spend the 15 days if I don't need those middle 2 weeks to
100%.
do any work.
Yeah.
So the client gets the great opportunity there, in my eyes, where they've only paid for 5.5 days. Instead, if they were taking a normal freelancer, as you say, you know, like a perm slash temp employee, they would be signing up to 20 days per month. And I'm not saying that people are going to sit about twiddle their thumbs, but if the business doesn't have the work for them, they're not doing anything. They might go do research or training or something like that.
It's
But the
100%.
business is, yeah, but the
Yeah.
business itself is not going to progress any projects. We don't have any,
And
unlikely, but you know,
say 100%. And actually, if we look at a typical employment relationship, you're generally, if you're expecting any more than 65% utilization of a person, then you're over expecting. So if you've got somebody down, we'll call it traditional full-time type employment relationship, whether that's a permanent person or an on-payroll temp or whatever else.
someone's around for 220 days a year.
Yeah, yeah. Then okay, you might not pay them for bank holidays, for example, or weekend or whatever else, but you're probably paying 100% of the bum time for 65% of effective
Output.
and operational or effectiveness. So yeah, I mean it's and you know what, there are clients whereby they they need those bums on seats. And let's face it, most organizations need a level of bum on seat. You need people that are around operationally
Yeah,
running the business all the time. You know,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
normal. But would you want that to change relationship? And can a person or a people within a change initiative deliver, if they delivered at 100%, they would normally outpace the ability of the organization to absorb the change. So at that point, is there a better pattern? And I'm not saying that a guaranteed 5 days a week doesn't suit things. There's plenty of patterns where that suits stuff.
Yeah.
And where it's aligned to that type of initiative and change, there's no reason why fractional can't provide that level of support.
So here's a bit of a question, and it's probably a bit of an unfair question, right?
Yeah.
To kind of put you on the spot, but you know, like what percentage of companies do you reckon could adopt fractional consulting? Is it everybody? Is it 2%? You know, I know data is probably pretty difficult
No,
to
no. Okay, so
LinkedIn and stuff like that, but
it's a difficult question. So, all right, first of all, probably just what is a company? So, there's 6 million registered companies in the UK. The vast majority of those would be considered a micro enterprise. They could be one to basically just a few people, and I mean that particular segment could benefit just if they were looking at sort of startups scale up type initiatives where that person or people might need something to help them move. So an example of that, we both run micro enterprises. Um, we could have fractional help around marketing because neither of us, marketing geniuses per se.
yeah,
And when we focus on marketing, we're not doing something else where
uh,
we'll probably be able to make more money. So, bringing in marketing fractional expertise would make, but has benefit to micro enterprises. And in terms of those micro enterprises, in terms of scale up, the options, that sort of thing, they might want to spend money. Things like architecture start coming to their own. If we go up to the next sort of segment, so we'll just call it the SME, which is the vast majority of what's left. So it's 95% are micro enterprises, and then, so you've got 5% left, which is, to do the quick math, 300,000 companies.
uh,
30,000 companies, whatever it is. The vast majority left is SMEs. Now, SMEs, like really, really large organizations, have needs for change. They try to avoid disruption, that sort of thing. And they need to get capability in for a period of time. So that they're well served by not just people doing stuff, but also the advisory around the strategy of doing stuff and those sorts of services. My voice is slightly going then. So it really fits quite well in that sort of small, medium enterprise space as well as it would in sort of the startup and scale up. Wherever you have change, fractional is really, really good. When you're in the large organization space, and we're talking probably the top 100 size companies, they also go through periods of change, and they will probably already have change teams and governance in place and all the rest of it, but they're not necessarily going to have the expertise to um, do whatever they're looking to do. And that might be a capability maturity uplift in a particular part of their business, if we look at it from an architecture point of view, to achieve what they need to do. It could even be auditing, or it could, they just want a second set of eyes. It could just be advisory around, because obviously a lot of people go through sort of the corporate chain. You tend to get a lot of indoctrination around that company, and you start seeing the less outside for you. So that can really help large businesses as well. So look, in terms of organization, I mean, it could be any organization, whether it's publicly or privately owned, of any size, can really benefit from fractional supply. But like with most things, when you try to align to different industry sizes and company sizes, it will differ slightly based on the
Yeah, my view was my view was I thought that VC-backed companies would benefit well from creating maturity in the business,
100%.
and
Yeah.
that's so I guess I agree with you that it could be any company, but I think it's a bit like horses for courses.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit like what you were describing there was pretty accurate, which is a big large company, like let's say a tier one bank. They've got, like one of the biggest banks in the UK are banking groups. I'm sure you know what banking group I'm talking about. But they have like nearly 1,000 solution architects and enterprise architects.
Yeah.
So, they've got a really mature enterprise practice and governance and, as you say, BAU change and everything else. So it's really only going to be kind of like assistance. They're not going to require you to set it up or anything like that.
Potentially, and that's obviously a very, very specific example in our world. But let's change the dynamics. Like, so obviously you've focused on VC there. Now venture capital could be to go buy a company to go split it off,
Yeah.
or to absorb, or whatever it is. So there's a lot in terms of mergers and divestiture. Would a business normally have the capability to actually go and do that? I mean, it's not a thing they do all the time. So,
No.
unless your company is to, divest and merge, you probably haven't built the capability around that.
Yeah.
So, actually bringing in, fractional supply into that would really, really benefit. And then if we
Yeah.
look at the big banking group type example, okay, so they've got a big EASA type organization which is able to manage and analyze and know the current operating environment very, very well. But would they be able to necessarily look at, we're looking to bring in a new banking product, and how would that interface across these various systems? They know the systems, they probably have an idea of the data and everything in there, but do they have the idea of the requirement? Or it could be more around regulatory, a new regulation has come out and they need to go and adhere to, or even ascertain whether they need to adhere to it. So, for example, very large banking group, they might need to adhere to DORA in Europe. And they might be going, how do we do that? But actually, if you'd followed UK regulation, you're probably almost there across your entire group anyway. And it's these bits that you need to go and do. And okay, that's advisory to a point, and it's basically taken almost what they've got, done a bit of a gap analysis, and gone, this is your report. But that's valuable in itself. They can then go and run with that.
Yeah.
So it's those things where, yeah, definitely in very large enterprises, whether it's doing merger divestiture or whether it's trying to adhere to new regulation, whatever it might be, that you wouldn't normally build an organization to cope with, because these are things that just get thrown from, the right hand side, or they're just things that don't happen often enough. That's where, it really comes into its own.
So one of the kind of areas that I think would be good to get your view on is like I'll give you my experience of it. Is the kind of the different size of companies. So as an example, your big large banking group, the bureaucracy and paperwork is we're just never going to get on the preferred supplier list. Too small, never going to be there. But yet, there's always this conversation that they're all about helping small businesses and stuff like that. But that's just never going to happen with us. So I find that frustrating that we'll go through agents to go into that, but it does tend to be more a
Um,
bump.
that's our model.
Yeah, so that bum on the seat model does tends to be that. The other bit there is VCs, more like a retainer type structure, or maybe 700-800 user size companies, something like that,
Yeah.
to give a bit of a definition for viewers. But that type of company for me is that they don't have a full-time EA practice. They might have a couple of solution architects, a couple of data architects, maybe a couple of application business architects,
Yeah.
but they're not glued together like a practice, and bringing in those types of skill sets. So the reason why I'm kind of mentioning that is I was interested in your view of, like, what's the flexibility that it gives to engagements versus just a bum on a seat?
So, I mean, there's quite a few points there that probably we could attack. So, look, obviously, in terms of flexible supply, and as we've already touched on this, it's what you need when you need it. Now, there's some restrictions around this, which could be probably worked out in advance anyway. And I'll touch on a few. So, and I don't quite know how. I think we basically go about getting business in different ways. So I'll touch on probably some of mine. So I do quite a bit direct to client. And I do mostly white label through consultancies these days.
Right,
In terms of agency, in the last 2 years, I've done 2 days.
right.
All right, so it's
Yes.
a slightly different model.
Mhm.
And now, in terms of where you said about getting on board with the PSLs and all the rest of it, now, if it's a direct to client relationship, there's no reason why you can't have your MSAs signed and your NDAs signed up before you actually do an SOW. And it's the MSAs and the NDAs that generally take the legal time.
Right.
Whether you're accepting client terms or whether the client's accepting supply terms, it really depend on which is quicker generally, but generally it depends on the organisation as well. Then you can agree later on what that SOW looks like, and you can do that after a point of pre-sales. So, my engagements for direct to client is generally, more often than not, we have a quick chat just to basically see what they're looking at. We might evolve that into a workshop type activity, by which I mean it's just a decent chat. We get together, we've got a bit of an agenda, and we start knocking through what the client actually wants. And then we've put out an SOW, and move forward. Now, there's no reason why an MSA or an NDA can't go out quite early on in that process. And actually, NDAs generally go out very, very early in the process. Otherwise, you can't even have a chat. So there is that. Now, as that sort of, let's say we've got an engagement to do A, B, and C, but something happens to the company during that process, and all of a sudden there needs to be changes to that, or you find that the initial information of which it was based on, some of the assumptions, all the rest of it, just aren't right. Well, you can do that through a change request mechanism. And what I tend to do with my contracts and SOWs is there's an established contract mechanism which allows an established change mechanism which allows for both sides to agree a change to the contract.
Right.
And generally very, very simple. It's literally just a piece of paper which says blah, 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 blah. Person signs it, jobs are good. And so they can still have that level of flexibility as if they've gone and somehow just built their own internal consultancy to go and do these things.
Mhm.
Now with I'm sorry, my dog's barking, but with the
That's fine. I think it's fine. No.
no, luckily it's quite quiet. With sort of the white label consultancy arrangements, and getting onto PSLs, they've generally done that as part of bigger pieces of work anyway,
Uh,
or as just a general interaction with a client. So I've generally already come to a point of terms with the consultancy that I might be white labeling through. We have an idea of there's an MSA in place, there's an NDA in place, idea around commercials, payment terms, that sort of thing. And then it's just issuance of it as needs come up.
yeah. So how long do you think on average does it get? Like, let's say somebody comes to you. Like, I've had the last 6 months, I've probably had 3 or 4 people reach out to me and say, look, I'd like to get you in to do a bit of work for us. And, that to me is, so first is, it's really great because I go, that's really good because people want to come and talk to me. And I feel like some of my LinkedIn posts are actually coming across, people recognizing, without the LinkedIn algorithm probably hiding me. Um, I kind of feel, oh, that's really great. But then either it drags on for months and
Yeah.
nothing happens, or it takes me like 3 months to onboard them once they've taken like all of the procurement and legals and all that. What are you kind of seeing, and how do you find cash flow like that?
I'll tell you what, it varies really, really wildly. So
Right.
I'll go for the two most extreme examples. The first one would be it was actually very, very recent, it was yesterday, whereby we managed to, something came in really urgent, and within a space of 2 hours, I was working on it.
But had you done work for them before already?
No, no. So this is completely brand new client,
Right. Okay.
bringing in. So it basically went from awareness right to action and having to get a paperwork and having to put together. It was a fixed cost piece of work as well. So having to put together the SOW and making sure that we're happy with all the payment terms and all the rest of it. And we turned that around in 2 hours. That includes the fact that it's a white label consultancy relationship. So they wanted things like they wanted to make sure that proof of company, VAT registration,
Ah,
insurance, passport, everything
yeah,
effectively.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if you've got both sides that are willing to drive really, really quickly in that sort of panic situation, you can, if you're quite organised, you can turn it around really, really quickly.
Yeah.
The other extreme to that was, a relationship I started to try and cultivate with a consultancy back in 2016.
Right.
We didn't do any work together until 2020, or billable work together until 2020.
Right.
So it's 4 years. So we talk about some really, really big extremes here, and
Yeah.
I think it's never see never see a work around trying to do networking or bringing in interest or anything else as dead, because even if it's you never get anything direct, you might get something indirect. And that whole, if you look at your typical sales funnel and you look at the fact that you spread awareness. So basically, potential clients have an idea that you exist and what you do and all the
Yeah.
rest of it. And then you try and bring that. So then they come to you because they're interested in what you provide and how that might work for them and all the rest of it. And then you try and help them through that decision phase to actually make the decision to come to Paul or come to Richard and our respective companies to go do whatever it is for them, and then the action of basically securing that sale, doing the statement of work and making sure all the contracts are all in place and all the rest of it, so you can go and start what it is that they require.
Yeah.
And I say that it's depending on the target segment, depending on the channel I tend to use or whatever, it really does vary trying to get through that funnel.
Yeah. So what sort of, I mean, I think we've kind of talked through, various things such as like what's the definitions and part-time, client flexibility, costs,
Yeah.
onboarding. I find cash flow a pain because I can get December and January where I might earn absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And it's different, that's different from a kind of bum in the seat. But where I was kind of going to ask you was is what do you think the risks are? And that's why I brought up the December, January, because it's a risk to us that we have no income. And that's like 20% of, your whole annual income, which is quite a lot of money. If I paused your salary for 2 months, you'd be pretty having a word with me, going, what's going on?
I
But
think
I find vendors don't recognise that, they're doing so much in the background that I don't think they recognise the elapsed time and the impact that has to you. So flipping that on its head is what's the risks to them?
okay. So and you very much hit the nail on the head there. There's a big risk to the supplier in this. Effectively, if if they've got you on hold for 2 months, you could be losing 2 months' money. And let's face it, most permanent people are 2 months away from losing everything. So if they lost their income for 2 months, they would lose everything. Um, So obviously we need to be a bit more resilient than that, you know. But in terms of the other flip of the coin is we don't stop. So if you're waiting, and I'll give an example in a moment about this, but you know, if you're waiting for a client to come back based on a conversation and they go, oh yeah, you know what, we really, really want you, there's a chance that you no longer have the availability to service that client.
Yeah.
And that comes in different variations. So it could be that you can still play a part, but you're going to have to augment it with other people. It could be that, and as we saw this in 2021 a lot, which is you just can't get hold of anybody to help them out because the market becomes so constrained. And we do have this unfortunate pattern in the UK where everybody wants to do things at the same time. From our point of view, it's like buses coming. You know, we've got 5 buses all of a sudden, one hasn't come for a while. But from a client point of view, it's they really start constraining the market. And even though I think we all try to advise, look, you're better off if you're looking to actually do something, look, try and get it done as soon as possible, especially because at least then you've got an idea of what the market conditions are rather than waiting. But if you could just plan these things where you know, and this is it, nobody can really predict the market, but if you're a client and you could predict supply curves, then you would probably put everything in the
So,
low.
so do you think you would have the balls to literally say to a client, if you don't sign me up in 7 days, I just can't guarantee it. And do you know what? I'll not be around if you don't want to do that. Because
I mean,
I really,
you know what? I'll give that example now. Actually, so back quite a few years ago, I was onboarding a very, very large system integrator, and it will remain nameless. But because of the onboarding process took so long, I actually managed to squeeze a couple of engagements in between the initial conversation and when it actually came off. And to be fair, when it came off, there was quite a lot of work to do. So it really did tie me up for about 18 months, almost 2 years. So it did come off, but there was a danger there. And actually, I'll go into a bit more detail about that. There was a danger there whereby that big system integrator wouldn't have had access to me because I could have ended up having a piece of work that went over. Now, weirdly, the last piece of work before them, they actually wanted me to do something else, and they actually missed out by a day.
right.
So it was a day between the system integrator getting me and the client, which was also a system integrator, weirdly, they became one, actually being able to continue using my services, albeit for something different. And I mean, this is the problem. So at the moment, it looks like it's very much a client market. So a client may feel that they can drag their feet a bit, but what I will always advise is that you might feel that now, the market might provide that capacity now, but all of a sudden the market changes because everybody wants to do something at the same time because it's all based on the same social triggers. And
Right.
at that point, there is no guarantee you're going to be available. So I think it's always prudent everybody has to be aware of the risk of not having something resourced. But let's face it, from our point of view, we don't want to because pre-sales costs money. It might not be costing the client, but it costs us a lot of money, and we have to put a lot of investment in it. Do we really want to go and do pre-sales for things that we aren't going to be able to do? So there is a bit of a bit of a balancing act. We need to make sure that if we are going to do pre-sales, that it's something we can probably do based
Yeah.
on the initial assessment of the potential conversion from that client. You have to take that into consideration, but if the client changes those metrics because they want to delay something out 3 months, it has to be at the realization that no organization is likely to have the resource. It's not just us in our capacity as fractionals. You usually find that actually quite large companies all of a sudden have lots of demand and they're unable to.
Yeah,
It's
I find it difficult to be because like I want to be fair to the client. I
yeah,
want to be honest and open, but I find myself not being honest and open. I find myself kind of getting just taking what they want. And I kind of feel like saying, like, I really want to give you the best service, but by having radio silence for weeks, I
Yeah.
kind of don't know what you're doing. And I don't want them to come back and go, right, we're all good to go. And you go, I'm sorry, I'm not available. Because
It's
I kind of feel like it's my fault for resourcing schedule, you know?
it's
And
not. It's not. And I had this bit of a fight with a client last year actually around me providing them resource certainty, and I was doing so, but um, they failed to, secure the piece of work they got resource certainty for. Now, um, I basically at that point had said, look, I can't give you resource certainty anymore because you effectively wiped out 4 weeks.
Mhm,
And that's coming back, that's a month, right? So for a lot of people, a month is quite crippling. Um, so I think you just have to be fair to everybody, and that
mhm,
includes fairness to yourself. So we all talk about sustainability in business, um, not specifically the ESG stuff, but but keep making sure that a business can continue to function, that it has the capability to continue to function, the cash revenues, the ability to absorb continuity events, that sort of thing. Um, and we have to adhere to that as well. So, we're not here to just service one client.
mhm.
Um, we're here to service any client potentially that will benefit from our services. And even from a macro point of view, macroeconomic point of view, we've taken ourselves out willingly for, let's say, a month, 2 months, just to try and help that client when they decide to come to the party. It's not good. It's not good economic sense for the UK either, which obviously will drive their revenues at some point. Um, so look, I won't feel bad about it, but it does need managing. And actually, as part of the sort of your initial approach to a client, depending on what channel you're going through and all the rest of it, getting an appreciation of how long the process is going to take on their side before they actually want to start doing stuff, getting as much as you can lined up, um, and then start being able to put in your calendar the pencil marks of penciling them out gives you an idea of, well, okay, this is going to take them 2 months before they can come to the party. Do
Yeah.
you know what? We can go do the 2 months somewhere else. But it's on their risk that maybe just come back in 2 months. We might need to move things around. We might need to change the type of delivery or whatever it
Yeah.
is that need to try and accommodate them. But
I,
there will be
I,
instances where you just can't.
yeah, I think for me, I take it back a little bit to one of the things we talked about earlier in the podcast, which is, that flexibility, the fractional consultant definition of being around, but, not being around, not costing them money, but having a PO.
Yeah,
And I think those things get all a bit forgotten about in the very, very interim part. So I think, and that was one of the reasons why I said
yeah,
to you, look, I'd be really keen to do something that tries and it kind of explains a lot of the market or the fractional consulting world to the market, because about 3 years ago when I kind of entered it, and I have done the odd full-time contract for a short period of time, but predominantly for me, I kind of thought initially it was just going to be I'll be looking for part-time jobs, and I didn't really transform into my head that it was sales and marketing. I was going to give up some of
people
my
fall
year's
into
earnings for that,
a lot. A lot of people fall into it. When I started contracting, I mean, and that was a very long time ago, but it was very much on the initial. Oh, I'm doing it to earn money. I want to do it for a short period of time, and yeah, wrongly I saw it as almost employment, but not secured. And it was,
Mhm.
and I mean, my mindset evolved quite quickly when you get hit by the realities. There's people that do enter this market, and they go a different route. I mean, and if we look now, a lot of people will be coming out of the perm market and going into contracting will
Uh-huh.
probably largely go for an umbrella route.
Mhm.
So they literally are temporary employees. They're on somebody else's payroll or the rest of it. They don't actually have those overheads or anything else. I think it serves quite a lot of people quite well.
Mhm.
But when you want to maybe go to the next level of that,
Mhm.
and you actually want to start having that brand and servicing and actually having more control of your own destiny and that sort of thing, then you moved up. That that
For me,
level of thinking is just really different.
yeah, for me, it was a bit like I'm never going to be a contractor CTO. So maybe there is some interim jobs, but they are few and far between. You maybe get CIOs, CEOs, CFO roles, but they are very much either a fixed term contract for 3 years, which maybe that's what the job demands for that
Yeah.
company, or they're really interim and it's just a gap. It's to cover the gap of the company's been left short, either somebody's vacated via illness or vacated via quick job exit, and they just need somebody to, you know,
And that's that separation again from what is operational versus what is maybe more strategic, transformational, change led.
yeah,
And we'll touch on the CTO, CIO that you've highlighted there. Yeah, if you're going in to do an operational CIO role, then that's probably not fractional supply. If you're going in doing advisory to operational CIO, that probably is.
yeah.
But if you're going in to change that organization, whether it's through strategy or transformation in terms of that planning of what that looks like, or moving forward, and that could involve advisory, it could involve doing of stuff. That starts very much falling into this bracket. And if we look at the vast majority of CTO roles now, they aren't running IT functions. They are very much product leaders. They're very much in that space where there's a digital product or a set of digital products for a digital engagement, digital outcome. And it can be transient. So it can be, once this is in play, actually, you don't need a transformational change CTO anymore. You just need someone to keep the lights on, whatever that looks like. So I wouldn't, when aligning to any traditional role type, and I try not to use roles in describing services, but when you're doing those sort of things, I think it's that separation of, is it operational or is it change, strategy, transformation? You're doing something different. And I think if you can make that change, that differentiation in anything, then you can decide what value you can add as a fractional and what really is not suitable for you.
Mhm. It's a good point you made there about not being aligned to a job role. As we're obviously both enterprise architects and we've come up through the ranks of
Backgrounds,
strategic
yeah. I mean,
architect.
look, I've done IT director roles, I've done CIO,
Yeah.
CTO roles. I love
But
architecture,
but
but
as fractional, you're not being a role, you're being more
yeah,
advisory, you're being more
a
supportive.
consultant, literally. You could, and having that. I mean, let's face it, having an architecture background makes you a damn good consultant.
Uh-huh.
Because you have that real strength of background of everything that's going on and what is required to actually drive change and all the rest of it.
Uh-huh.
It's almost educated advisory, but it's you're not going in necessarily as an enterprise architect. You could be going in providing enterprise architecture services, and I think
Yeah.
that's the
Like
difference.
setting up a practice or,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the roles recently, I was doing was, it was maybe about 18 months ago actually, the kind of output. And what it demonstrated was an assessment of looking at the business, and the solution architect had like 7 job hats, so that's not what an enterprise architect would then normally go in and do. But as part of me helping them build out an enterprise architecture function, it was job descriptions, roles and responsibilities, who's doing what,
Yeah.
and then recognizing where people are failing, where people's time's limited. As you say, it's almost like a skill set. It's not a job type as such. It's a wide, we both have the TOGAF background, the open architecture group framework background. And we would both go, oh, it's business, data, apps, and tech,
Oh, I'm going to be that model. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they be that
Oh,
model,
yeah.
right? And
Right.
I've explained that to some startups and things like that, and they're like, what's that? So, and that's a standard enterprise architecture sort of framework to work from. But actually, that's not kind of what you would be doing. But it's because you see those as the 4 pillars, and something inside each of those pillars is the thing that you're going to do for the business,
Potentially, yeah, and I think you know those pillars have been slightly expanded out as we've gone
Oh
from
yeah,
sort of traditional system design into more organizational awareness. Things like what motivations are and what strategy looks like and blah, 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 go beyond the BDAT model. But the BDAT model is a great way of seeing what something does,
mhm,
what something needs to do, and especially from a technology system point of view. So, how many times do we go into technology organisations where they have no idea what their IT estate's doing, where they are with the life cycle or anything like that, and actually, what are the real impacts if something goes wrong?
mhm,
And generally, you'll find that through some level of corporate amnesia and all the rest of it, current state thoughts have just completely disappeared. Now, we know for the vast majority of IT initiatives, you need to have an idea of what current state looks like and what its impacts are and all the rest of it. So that in itself is a valuable skill. That in itself is a proper fractional billable skill, because how often do you need to go and figure out what the current estate looks like from scratch? In theory, you should be able to do it, embed it, and then have
yeah,
some sort of control in the organisation that continues to update it.
yeah.
You've done that bit, and it's operationalised, and they can go carry on with it.
Yeah,
And
and I think, you know, that's where, you know, I've been doing some mentoring for students, and you know, over the last 4 or 5 years, I've done quite a lot of mentoring, and now I've set up a course to help people. That's what the All Things Architecture community was for, was to help people bring in, you know, the view of how do you become a product owner, or from a business analyst, a product owner, and from an SME server engineer to a solution architect, and from a solution architect, tech architect, up into being an EA. But one of the key things that you've said there is really, really interesting for me is, how do you demonstrate in an interview you just have skills? You know, so like some of the stuff, and that's where fractional consulting is quite aligned to. It's kind of not, as you say, it's not a job type, but it's a set of skills. And
yeah,
quite often in I'll say interviews, people ask you, so how will you output this and how will you do that? And you go, well, I'm kind of not really sure how to answer that, because you don't know what the outputs are, because you don't have maybe the resources on board at the moment.
yeah,
But the other flip side of that is I've just got a set of skills. I know how to come in and do stuff, and I know how to articulate it. And it's hard to demonstrate that in a CV. So when I'm working through with some of my mentoring students, what I kind of get them to do is build a really good profile so that people understand that they're very rounded to that
yeah.
BDAT model. You know, they're not just a business architect, they're not just a data architect. They sit across the wide thing, but they can jump down into one area, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the mark of a good architect. If we very, very specifically got into architecture now, and that's the mark of a really good architect, is that being able to take a very, very wide view, but not lose track of the really, really deep elements of that. But in
Mhm.
terms of like interviews and stuff, look, I did an interview last week. It was the first time I'd done one in a very, very, very long time. I
Right.
don't tend to do them. Um, as I said, I generally go through like a chat into workshop into
Sure.
SOW supply. But I mean, you get and it's the cats here. You get
That's
asked
all right.
various different sort of questions, and some of them are around how would you approach and how you insight things. And what people probably want is an answer which is quite a linear, logistical thought process of how you go about your first few days or what you need to start and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And if we look at typical architects, they're very, very good in tactics and strategy. They tend to be slightly weaker in the logistic type thought process, which is literally that I can think of everything at the same time, and it'll go bang. But that almost serialization of how it looks going from A to B
Mhm.
is something that really separates the absolute best architects from
Mhm.
those that are just merely doing, the typical librarian type architect that we see in various organizations. And because it's that pragmatic, that actually bringing the benefits of architecture alive, which is done through that logistical thought. So if you can do that during an interview, and then you effectively just think of two things, and it's you having clear purpose, bringing people on the journey. So what you're trying to do is bring the interviewer on that journey,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
yet just another architectural view, as we
Yeah.
would always create a different architectural view of whatever that person, that stakeholder needs to know. In
Yeah,
this case, it's generally how would you go about blah 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 and the rest of it. It's just that
yeah.
logistical view and that clear purpose
It's
in their mind.
absolutely spot on about taking people on a journey through the actual CV slash interview part. You know, it's part of one of the courses that's on all things architecture. Is, you know, how to take people on that journey, because
Storytelling part, that's literally it. It's
yeah, because I think it's that as is to the to be, isn't it? You know, so you need to do that with your CV slash experience slash skills,
yeah.
whatever that is that gives people the comfort in the interview that you know what you're talking about.
I mean, the whole
But
problem
again,
with
it's
CVs, we could probably go on about that for a while, but the problem with CVs is they're generally seen as an employment instrument, and we all
yeah, that's what I was just about to say.
yeah.
It takes it away from. I think it's a great thing to sort of talk about a little bit though, and we'll probably wrap this up anyway. But
No, and that's basically where I was going for this. So if it's typically an employment instrument, and the problem is it is the organisations that ingest that. Now, as you know, I have nothing against agencies. I think they're
yeah, me too. I think they're
do
a
a
good part of the
really, really
ecosystem.
good job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are quite a few agencies that don't. And what they do is they go out to a client and go, "What do you want?" They don't help that client build out what that resourcing profile would look like, or what the most efficient way of doing what they're trying to achieve, and all the rest of it. It's literally how many BAs do you want, or whatever like that.
Mhm.
And what are they doing? Oh yeah, I need 5 BAs because I'm putting an ERP system in. All right, okay. So they go out to market and basically look for CVs very, very specifically. Right, I want business analysts that have skills in this very, very specific ERP environment
Yeah.
to this very, very specific ERP environment. For example, now, we know there's a whole bunch of reusable skills across different types of people that could go and do that job.
Yeah.
But actually, a recruitment agency won't see that. What they'll do is if they can't get the keywords on a word search of your CV, it's out the door. Right. And this is the problem with dealing with that market. But you're dealing with that market in agencies that specifically specialize in resource augmentation or capacity augmentation.
Mhm.
It's not around those agencies don't have any specialism around capability augmentation.
Mhm.
So I've come across a client, I really care about the client, they're trying to do this. There's probably no job rolling for that. So, a new technology drops, it's AI, because that's going to be the next big one. There's no defined role for that, it hasn't been defined yet, it's too new.
Yeah.
How do you provide capability to that? And
Yeah.
there's only, I mean, if you look at agencies across the UK, barely 1% of them can do that. Um, but they're the ones that will try and form that real relationship with both their clients and the candidate they're putting forward. And probably in this market, if you are using agencies as your primary segment and channel to get work,
Yeah.
those are the ones you really want to target. You want to fit.
Yeah, I've got a couple of agencies that I think do fit into that, but they're smaller niche
Yeah,
agencies,
yeah,
and then the other ones are consultancies. You know,
yeah.
who
And that's your next one along. So
yeah,
consultancies already are able to do that type of
yeah,
that management. They are supplying potentially resource augmentation, capacity augmentation, but they're also doing capability augmentation, and
mhm,
they're really used to that. And yeah, you might use a CV to get in there, but they'll try and see the person behind the CV and what you're actually able to do in terms of plug in some of the things that their clients want. And I think it's those horses for courses. If you want to be an architect at an organisation doing solution architecture, for example, for a finance system implementation, whatever that
yeah,
organisation is looking to do, maintain their digital presence, whatever. Then yeah, you know what? Have a CV, go pitch it to an agent. They'll go to market, or they'll have requirement from market to get you an SA job, but it's not fractional consultancy.
yeah.
It's a job. Um, if you want to go beyond that, then it has to start coming down to relationships, because what you need to convey is greater than what you can put on a piece of paper.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a good, and I think that's a good place to probably wrap up on. But, you
Good.
know, it is not a job; it is something that you can't convey on a piece of paper. But maybe building relationships with various people and having your niche agents is really what enables us to do what we do, you know. So listen, thanks very much for today.
Thank you,
I've
Paul.
really enjoyed it. Hopefully, you know, I'm keen to get some more podcasts out there. They'll be on all things architecture, so you know, and obviously we're kind of setting this up today as the first one, so there's probably a few wee hiccups and stuff, dogs barking and cats jumping about. But it's, I think that's the thing. It's about trying to be authentic and not be too polished, isn't it? You know, people want to believe in who you are and the fact that
If
you've
we
got
look
real
at,
world experience. You know,
but there's a level of personality branding in this. It's personal branding, so
yeah,
it's not just what you can do; it's who you are.
yeah,
To a big point, and yeah, it can be quite difficult to scale from that if you really get too far into that, because you know you might need to offer work to other people. But it is like with all most things in business, it's very much relationship games, and people like people.
yeah,
So yeah, it's yeah, big important, really
yeah.
important. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, rest
If
of
you want to do any future
month.
ones, Paul, just let me know.
Yeah, brilliant. Awesome, man. Thanks very much. I'll see you soon. Cheers.
Thank you, mate. Thank you.